right, welcome. We are back with some more Proverbs. Today we are going to discuss the family, and we've got several verses that go along with it. Kind of thought we would sort of take it youngest to oldest and then spread out from there. So we're going to talk about kids first, talking about wisdom. So we'll jump right into some scripture. Aaron, would you care to read Proverbs 15:20?
Okay. A wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish man despises his mother.
Okay. So I think it'd be good to read all of the scripture and then just kind of discuss. If you guys have got some extra proverbs to add, I'm not opposed to that. Bryce, you want to read? You want to read this year, 2020?
Oh. Yes.
2020 vision for children. This is what we have right here.
This is a good one.
All right. If one curses his father or his mother, his lamp will be put out in utter darkness.
All right. And then,
Amen.
Yes.
Read that to my kids every night before they go to bed.
It's dark.
Enjoy your time in the dark.
That's it. So, Joey, you want to read 23:25?
Yes. Let your father and mother be glad. Let her who bore you rejoice.
All right. So it seems that especially 15, 20, and 23:25 really encourages kids to live a godly life, to be respectful of their parents. So I guess, what do you see as the wisdom of the child? What's Solomon in this section here encouraging kids to do?
Well, in 15, the one that we look at, Proverbs 15:20, there's also another verse in 15 that kind of deals with for children as well. It's 15:5. It says, "A fool despises his father's instruction, but whoever heeds reproof is prudent." If you read the rest of Proverbs 15, it doesn't specifically, is talking about just a child in the relationship with their parents, but the word reproof is used quite a bit in Proverbs. There's several other times it's used. It's used four other times in that chapter, and so I kind of think part of the big idea with that is being willing for, as a child, to receive reproof from your mother or your father. And that's one that, we all could say we know, like, that we should do that. But I think we could all think back to when we were younger and wanting to receive reproof from our parents sometimes probably didn't go that well. I can think of several times when I was younger in regards to that, and the quote that the quote that comes to me is one, I think it's by Tom Sawyer, that was like, "Man, when I was 14 years old, my dad didn't know a thing, but when I turned 20, I figured out he learned a whole lot." So I kind of probably just butchered that, but the idea is, right, when we're younger, we don't want to receive the instruction from our parents, and the one who isn't willing to receive that instruction, who despises it. Proverbs says in 15:20, right? A foolish man despises, or wait, what was that? Oh, I guess it's back to, fool despises his father's instruction. So when you despise that, you're not honoring. First off, you're not honoring God, because that's one of the commandments that God gives us. Honor our father and mother, and we're not willing to receive wisdom if we're not willing to listen to the correction that our parents give us. And even us probably hear that. I think most of I know our parents are still alive. My dad every once in a while will, not that he's necessarily reproving me, but he gives me suggestions and things to do, and I appreciate it now more than I did, like when I was younger, because you kind of realize over time, oh man, like my parents, they have wisdom. I should maybe listen to some of the things they say.
I think that's a good point, that the reproof and the parent-child relationship doesn't stop when you get out on your own. It continues. It's not just for elementary age or preteens. It goes all through our lives as long as we have our parents. So.
But in part of that, it talks elsewhere in Scripture about parents parents not being too harsh with their children. I mean, part of what you ideally want is a relationship with your child where, again, like that reproof can come to the full fruition because again, at the time, again, scripture says at the time no discipline seems pleasant, but you look at what it produces and how you're able to look back. If you're so harsh so that you jettison the relationship, you end up losing some of those benefits because you can't come back to that. Like you don't have that that element. And that's really the thing. Like you read these passages and you're kind of like, oh man, how can I get my kids to be more respectful, especially when you're dealing with like young kids and trying to instill that. And some of these things come with time and have those benefits with time.
The whole Bible, if you go through from Exodus, Deuteronomy, First Kings, all of it, it talks about how being obedient to your parents equivalates to living long in the land and having longevity of life somehow. Solomon, when I think it's First Kings, Solomon is told by God, obey the commandments that like your father did, so that you'll live long in the land. Ephesians 5, children obey your parents, and then he quotes scripture from, I think it's Deuteronomy, about so that you can live long in the land. And so there's somehow that being obedient to parents increases in some way longevity of life.
Absolutely.
Which is, I mean, if you think about it.
Yeah, we all know what you're thinking. You don't have to say it. You don't have to say it.
And I think that, to me, the parent-child dynamic, it goes hand in hand. I don't want to make it seem like we're separating. Well, we're going to address kids first and then parents second. It kind of goes both ways. Austin, you want to read Proverbs 22:6? This kind of gives the same thing we've heard from a parenting standpoint.
Should be familiar. Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it.
So there's got to be that relationship, that back and forth. And I think the reproof, the kind of what Joey, you were talking about, that the loving relationship, so that when things do get hard, you can come back around and care for somebody and be there for them. It comes from a place of we've been where they were at. The other day I heard some rustling around in our pantry, and I heard some plastic crinkling together, and I knew exactly what was going on. I told Cooper, don't go get any snacks, and he was in there getting a little packet of fruit snacks, and I said, Cooper, and he goes, Dad, how'd you know I was in here? And I was like, well, I could hear, number one, and I didn't say it to him, but my second thought was, I tried that same thing, and my mom busted me. So, I was there. I know the way things work, and as they get older, I've been a young man struggling with things, and I look forward to being there for them in difficult times and being able to say, I've struggled with the same thing, and I want to help you with that. So, as a parent and as a child, we must be respectful, of the other, but also loving and caring for them. So how do you see those two kind of going hand in hand?
I mean, you get back to the fact that Proverbs is written as a parent to a child. I mean, in the opening chapter, you have this, hear my son, your father's instruction, and take heed of this. And so it's one of those where you eventually find yourself realizing once you get older that as a child, you thought, my parents don't want anything good for me. And Solomon could literally say, I wrote you like a book about it. I gave you everything I could for you to succeed.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the tough part is, I can remember several times growing up saying, oh, my parents just don't want me to have fun. That's why they want me to come home earlier. They, whatever it was that they were implementing. And that's not it. It's a protection. They love us, and, I love my two. And there are times where I see, dude, if you play video games for more than an hour, you lose your mind. Like, you're not kind and fun to be around like you normally are. So I've got to shut that down. And it's viewed as a punishment as opposed to, once you detox from trying to go to war in Fortnite for an hour, like you're a pretty cool kid. I like being around you. So it's for the good that we implement some of those things.
I think it's one of the principal ways that you see the blessings of God and the love of God too, as far as within the picture is what better way than generation to generation the love continuing within a family? And that's not to say though that, and many of you probably watching this come from broken families in some degree or another, or families with secrets or dysfunctions. One of my elders said last night, one of the funny things is that families with secrets think that they're families with secrets, like the idea that they're actually keeping these things, like all that stuff comes out at some point. And so the whole idea of training up your children in the way they should go is that they're following you, and that there's a richness of relationship and life that is incredibly beautiful and incredibly lost in a lot of ways today, to where we see this sort of generational abandonment, to a sense, where you feel like a group of people without fathers, without mothers, without grandfathers, without grandmothers, and you don't have that continuity and strength and blessing that comes from that good relationship. And I think that should drive us to continue to strive towards that in the relationships that we have with one another. That it's not like train up the child in the way they should go and they won't depart from it. Parents probably hearing that now go, oh my goodness, like I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to do that. I don't know the exact perfect and effective ways, but and I don't think anyone does, and I don't think there's any answers that are perfectly given, even in the book of Proverbs, like this is the exact method that you should get your kids to be respectful, as much as it's talking about a life that you want to live and that you want to draw them into. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, I don't think Solomon could give a perfect answer.
yeah.
Considering
A lot of kids.
Rehoboam,
Yeah, I mean, there's the
how history worked out for him, but
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think kind of transitioning to the next section, one of the best things that we can do as parents for our kids is to care for our spouse, to set the example. And whether that's, this is how a woman should be treated, if you're a man, this is how, that you can love your spouse. If you're a woman, I think the example of here's how to act, here's how to live, should say something. And it should speak volumes that when we do miss the mark, the kids kind of not correct us, but they want the good that they've been shown. And the reason I say it that way is that, with the chaos of schedules and things getting rooted around there, we always had a prayer time, me and the boys, before we went to sleep, and we'd missed that for a little bit. And the other night, my little one was like, we don't pray anymore. And I was like, well, what do you mean? I said, you don't pray during the day? He goes, no, we don't pray when we go to sleep. And it was that one time of prayer that we had that they really missed. And I thought, I set the example, and then when I got away from it, they knew what was right. They knew what they needed to do, and they helped me. So I think the living out of your faith, the example is the big one that's there. Let's read. Somebody read. Let's see, Eric, you want to read Proverbs 18:22?
He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord.
All right. I will defer to my brothers, but that seemed to be one of the only good husband proverbs that we could come up with. And really what it is just find you a good wife. It's like, if you want to be a good husband, you find you a good wife, and you'll be good.
You need all the help you can.
Yes, which I would 100% agree with that. But I also think that in a very real way, we joked about it before video started. I think that if any man started living out what the Proverbs said before chapter 18 and what it says after 18, he's going to be a good husband. A lot of guys take the verse where the man is the head of the household, and they love that. It's like, oh, well, that's right. But they forget the part where it says, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church. And if we love Jesus and cared for him the way we're supposed to, we're going to be a good husband. We're going to be a good father. So when you see this, and it's maybe one of the only ones that directly addresses being a husband, what can you see within the Proverbs that kind of sheds light on what it's like to be a good husband, to care for a wife and kids?
It's interesting because this parable, there was a guy by the name of James who went to Bible college when I was there, and I'm not exactly sure. I think he was from Kenya or Ethiopia, and was a non-traditional student. And he was talking about that one time with me, that he was like he was like, remember, he said, remember when Adam and was in the garden searching for his mate, and God sent him all the animals, and he was looking through, and Adam, he made a comment, he said, Adam didn't know what to look for, but God knew what he needed, and God provided. And in a lot of ways, like even seeking out a godly wife is one of those things that with God's guide, like there's a huge level of God's guidance. This is maybe totally out in the weeds with you, but literally, like there's a transformation going on. There was a guy, I think it's Roosh is what he went by. He was a kind of, you might not be familiar with it, he ran a site, Return of Kings or something like that. It was all about like masculine manipulation of women basically to get them in bed. It was awful stuff, and he is now like recognizing how awful he was. And one of the things, he released an article recently saying like, the way I was going, I could not find a good godly woman because God protects them, and he was protecting them from awful men like me. And he made the comment, and it was just like, whoa, like the wisdom that he was coming, like, and coming from like a man who came from a totally, like, and still is sort of in this wrestling moment with his own faith. You kind of see how he's coming to this now, recognizing even the truth of, of God's word with that. So,
Absolutely. I'm sure you've seen it before, Facebook or meme, or wherever you might have caught it. There's the old saying that the only way you can find a true godly woman is to be so lost in the search of God yourself that you bump into her as she's searching for God as well. And we kind of look at that and we think, oh, that's cheesy, but honestly, that's the truth. Is that if we're so lost looking for God and God alone, we might bump into somebody that's godly as well. But if we're not anywhere close to God, we're going to run in the same circles as other people that aren't. So that really limits the quality of folks that we might run into. What are some other things that strike you as being a good husband?
Oh, I think just the very verse before, Proverbs 18:22, death and life are in the power of the tongue. I think that's a good, solid reminder where you can escalate a situation very easily with your words, or you can de-escalate a situation very easily. Both husband and wife have that power. Parents and kids both have that. But that reminder, I think, for a wise husband is, death and life. You are choosing your course here. And that doesn't mean, you have to be, play wrong every time, like I'm always wrong or anything like that, but literally choosing how to approach a situation and how to use your words for unity in a situation, like we are in this together, I think for me in relationship, a lot of times I think about, rather than seeing something in Vivian as being opposite or opposed, I look at Vivian as my teammate and see that thing as trying to interfere. I'm like, okay, how is this trying to come between us and we're on the same side, rather than seeing her on the opposite side and saying, well, you're always up, I'm opposed to you. I know we're on the same team. How are we going to deal with that other thing trying to come in?
that's great. That's a really good way to look at it.
Yep. I think it's that teamwork that plays, within a marriage, is that to be a good husband, there has to be a good wife, and to be a good wife, you have to be a good wife for your husband. It goes back and forth. And the few times that Ashley and I have ever got cross with each other, it's because I'm not been a very good husband. I've griped about something that I could have just kept my mouth shut about. I've said something and thought that there was a way better way to communicate what I just said than that. So I think living out that faith in Jesus, our life in God, is a great way to be a good husband. So, and Proverbs 31 is definitely the kind of the litany of here's what the quintessential godly woman looks like. I won't maybe have us read all of this, but let's see. Aaron, would you care to read Proverbs 31 verses 10 through 16?
Sure. An excellent wife who can find, for her worth is far above jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good, not evil, all the days of her life. She looks for wool and flax and works with her hands in delight. She is like merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She rises also while it is still night and gives food to her household, and portions to her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. From her earnings she plants a vineyard.
All right. Yeah, you look at this and the question is, who can an excellent wife find? And one of the first things it says is the heart of her husband trusts her. So a good husband trusts his wife. A good relationship is built on trust. And then I guess it launches into, why does he trust her? Because she provides. You know, this list and some of the other things here, it's not busy work, it's that I'm taking care of the family. So what do you see Scripture saying that a good wife is doing? Nobody wants to get in trouble when you see it.
I was just curious how far we were gonna dive into the like egalitarian, complementarian thing where where you have this companionship of, you're both going about your work, and not saying one is women's work and one is men's work, but that the two of you have worked out what your work is, and he trusts her because she's doing her thing, and she can trust him because he's doing his.
I think, without, I'm not gonna get too preachy on this particular topic, but every one of us at these tables can testify to the fact that we are better men because of our wives. And so somehow in the mind of God, you go all the way back to the garden and you see that it's not good for him to be alone. He needs a helper. And so he creates Eve from out of man, and the two become one flesh, and they work together. And I mean, it's just so clear as you look at godly men and women working together as husband and wife, how it's the woman that makes the man better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's why Scripture teaches it the way it does. That there may not be a lot of stuff about the husband and how wonderful he is, but there is stuff about the wife making the husband a better man.
Absolutely.
When the verse 11, the second part of that ends, and he will have no lack of gain, due to the trust that he has in her, because of who she is, and ultimately because she has a fear of the Lord, which is the very end of that proverb. Pretty much is.
You want to read verse 31? That's a fantastic way to kind of wrap up what we're talking about here.
Charm is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. And I think that's the one thing that encompasses that whole chapter. Because a lot of times women can look at this and be like, oh my gosh, like, how could I ever live up to doing every single one of the things? And the only reason why the wife in this passage and the mother in this passage that is being talked about was doing the things that she was doing is because it's out of her fear of the Lord. Her relationship with God, out of that overflowed everything else that's talked about in this passage.
And again, to go all this, this relationship is, we read this and you have to know that there's some friction as far as that there's always friction between men and women to a degree. And again, in the curses within the garden, that was also part of that that your desire shall be to your husband, and the difficult way that worked its way out. But you see instead like the flourishing interdependence that comes from like godly relationships, the way that he intended them to be. Not that I think sometimes for guys especially, we want there to just be like I just want my wife to kind of take care of things, and I just don't want the stress. I want to come home and be able to relax. And that's not how it works. But instead, when you have a household that flourishes, it's such a beautiful thing. And no one else has stepped in to praise their wife. I'm blessed. I'm blessed immensely where I get to see a family that flourishes and the love that comes from that. Yesterday, stepped out to go leave, and then of course forgot something. This is probably the third thing I forgot. So my wife at that point was like, "Oh, he's forgot everything. He's gonna forget." No, I came inside and she opened up a picture Bible while the girls were eating at breakfast and was reading to them. And I'm just it just to me I just of course, told her how much I love that and how I love seeing that. And so and each of us, again, if we could probably spend the rest of the hour talking about the blessings that we experience with our wives.
I think that what you just said is probably one of the biggest keys to healthy marriage is the compliments. Is
Yeah.
not just saying, man, I really like that in our brains, and then going on being like, aren't I lucky? But saying, I appreciate the way that you are with the kids. I see how you keep this house clean, and I hear you speaking to people and working stuff out, so I don't have to do thank you. That is, and all of that, I think Bryce, you rightly pointed out, it comes from, I've been given a beautiful gift. As a woman with children, I've been given a family, and I'm going to take care of them. As a man in my position, with a wife and kids, I have been given a family by God. I want to take care of that. Whatever position we find ourselves in, as a child, I've been given a home where I find love and care. I need to be respectful of my parents. It comes from, basically, I don't want to mess something up that God's given. I want to be a good steward of that. And, that last verse, charm is deceptive, beauty is vain. A woman who fears the Lord should be praised. And I think that's big. And as we'll see as we continue on, the wisdom that we can gain from Proverbs basically comes from the fact that God is awesome. He has given us so much. We should be wise in the way that we live and interact with people in the world. So we'll end our session here. I've enjoyed this time. I've enjoyed our discussion, and I think we'll pick up next week with finances. So hopefully you'll come back. That's sometimes can be what some people would think is a boring subject, but I enjoy it because God has blessed us richly with lots of things, so we should be a good steward of it all. We appreciate you, and we will see you next week.